Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be talking about the Fujifilm 200mm f2, a lens that I've owned for about 5 years, I want to say now, maybe a little under 5 years, and my all-time favorite sports lens that I haven't actually shot sports with in over 2 years. And of course, because I'm always up for a challenge, as are my friends, I did use it for a few portrait sessions, and I'm going to share those results with you in this video while I talk about the lens. For those who aren't familiar with it, this is a 200mm f2, so in full frame terms, it's a 300 2.8, renders images the same way. And here is a very special 1.4x teleconverter. It's a little different than the standard one, at least that's what Fuji tells us. And this will take it up to a 440mm full frame equivalent lens. And unlike all other teleconverters, I see no image degradation at all whenever I'm using this thing. So technically you get like 2 lenses when you buy this, right? We can justify it that way. Additionally, something I want to bring up is that this is my Fujifilm X-T3. This is the camera I had when I first bought this lens. Still a phenomenal camera, and I've got a couple of videos coming up on it, including, this actually came in as a request from a subscriber named Lena, shot me a message on Instagram asking me to test out Canon FD lenses on a Fujifilm X-T3, and it just so happened to be that in the past I used to shoot videos with this, so stay tuned for that video. But for today, I'm mounting it onto this because I actually have not really used this lens since the X-T3 days. Reason being is that I used to be hired for a lot of sports photography, but for the last 3 years, the majority of it has been video. You know when they say it's the photographer and not the equipment? This is not true when it comes to certain levels of equipment, because simply owning something like this will open certain opportunities up for you. I think one of the first non-lifting events I ever shot with this was a charity bike race, and I got a message from the lead photographer on the job afterwards saying that it was the best set of photos he's ever seen anyone shoot from that competition for as long as he's been doing it. Massive compliment. Of course, I am going to take all the credit, but I'd be lying to myself and to everyone here if I said that having a 200 f2 to shoot every weekend warrior and accountant who went in for this race didn't make a substantial difference, and clearly it left an impact on the people who got those photos. I was going through my list of Fujifilm gear. I'm thinking about making a video where I'm ranking all the stuff, and funny enough, this lens actually sits on the fence because of how specific use case it is, but it's still really cool to use for other things, as you'll see here. The lens on its own weighs about 5 pounds, and this hood is actually like a third of its size. So it really isn't as big as you would think. For a 300mm 2.8 full frame equivalent, this is on the small side. Optically, I think it's better than the Canon, and that's the only other one I really had any experience shooting with over the years. Just gonna place this guy to the side here for the aesthetic. There we go. Again, this is one of the best lenses I've ever used in my life, potentially the best lens, but the only problem, which I actually made a video on, is the questionable design of the lens hood. I'll link it in a card above if you want to check that out of curiosity. If you do one of these when you put them down, which we all do really, in the middle of shooting, you might want to invest in a second one, because this right here is just, it's not very good. And I ended up breaking the lens hood. It like just jammed off. I didn't have one for a few weeks. It was kind of annoying. So now I've got this new one, and I have another one just in case this one ends up breaking. But like I said, I haven't actually used this lens in about 2 years. That kind of sucks because it does take really good video as well, but those are going to be some really specific clips, and it's super unlikely that you're going to shoot an entire event on a lens like this. Let me grab this keyboard, and what we're going to do right now is actually go through some old photo shoots I did that I thought I'd be making YouTube videos about like years back when screen recorders were still cool. And you know, well, I got around to it a few years later, so let's take a look at them. Now, keep in mind that these are really old edits that reflected like certain styling decisions I had at the time, and some of them aren't even part of the same photo set, but it took a little work to dig up these photos because I didn't feel like re-editing everything again. So getting right into it. This is my friend Emily Grace, e.g. Drama Queen. She is a cosplayer, and I shot this Spider-Gwen back when the first Spider-Verse universe came out. First time I've ever used it for casual portraiture, and it was really interesting. I wish I did the 360 video like I do nowadays back then, because this is just a normal lot. What's cool about telephoto lenses in general is the subject magnification along with the background compression really does transform a scene entirely. And you get a really cool aesthetic that you can't really, like, you can kind of get it with something like the 50F1. It's just very different, mainly because of the subject magnification, especially guys, if you want to look jacked, have someone shoot you with a 200mm f2, you're gonna look like super huge. It's awesome. And it works out pretty well naturally, as you would imagine for a superhero. So taking a look at a lot of these photos, you see all the wiggling going on. I'm not really moving the camera all that much. It's just that it has such a narrow field of view. Any slight movement is going to be exaggerated. And I'm going to crop in on a couple of shots so you see some of the details, because this lens also renders a lot better than most lenses. The only other lens I could say that renders this well is the 50 f1, and that's when you stop it down to like an f2. Whatever magic they've done with this lens, I need them to apply it to every other lens moving forward. You also notice that I'm using single point autofocus here, and honestly, as a sports photographer for so many years, that's typically what I've relied on in the field, usually because the sports I shot, like strongman for example, the athletes would have other things running in front of them, and I'd want to make sure that I could autofocus lock, and I didn't want to have any tracking issues. So I've become accustomed to that. For all the problems continuous autofocus gives people, when you go to single point autofocus, it just ends up working really well. So, you know, that's kind of the workaround for the most part. So you have an issue with your camera's autofocus, just go to single point autofocus. We've been using it for years and it's never been a problem. Cropping in a little more on a shot like this, you can see down to the detail of the chucks. And remember, this is the X-T3, and the X-T3 is 26 megapixels. It's not the crazy 40 megapixels the X-T5 has, but also has a battery grip, which they didn't give you on the X-T5, and I don't like that. But yeah, the images were really crisp. This is all natural light. Really basic editing involved in these shots. And they're one of my favorite sets to date because of how simple it was, but also because of how fun it was. I'd love to do another shot nowadays where I legitimately have like walkie-talkies or something to communicate with someone to see what we could really knock out, especially in North Jersey or New York, because I've never done one in a city environment, and I think that would be really cool. Going along that theme of the transformative nature of super telephoto portraits, I want to bring you to this other shoot that we did together. And that was her in her self-made Belle costume, or cosplay, as you see here. We were actually just at a winery. Nothing special whatsoever. You had vines on the side, grass, and then some hills in the back. And for a frame of reference, this was actually part of an old X105 video I did, and I'm going to show you some clips from that, just so you see how different it looks through the standard field of view versus the 200mm f2. You're going to hear background compression all the time, but subject magnification and being able to separate them from the background so cleanly is really what defines a high-end telephoto prime. And these super fast telephoto primes that cost more than most of our cars are typically what they use in pro sports, and that's about it. So when you see portraits or some other photos taken that way, it looks really cool simply because we're not accustomed to seeing things with that field of view. That is what makes this such a cool lens. And not just this lens, telephoto lenses in general. If you want to get a kick out of something, try shooting someone at 400mm and let me know how you like those photos. We just stepped out and moved to the side, and we changed the backdrop completely just by simply repositioning her. And this is back when I was playing around with colors quite a bit. I'd really have to see how the eye autofocus would be on the X-T3. On the X-H2S, I know I threw those clips out of the two photos I took somewhere over here, but on the X-H2S, the eye autofocus is great. I was able to track my buddy Don while he was flying down with the one wheel and giving someone a high five on the side. And that's effectively it for the portrait sessions. I do have some others, but I would like to kind of update it and maybe make another video on this. So when it comes to sports, say you want to shoot sports for a living, or you're just a really big enthusiast and you want to justify spending money on a telephoto prime and you're in the Fuji ecosystem, you can find this thing used for half the price of what it costs new, and that's actually one hell of a deal. All the images, all the autofocus performance, everything you just saw was on the X-T3. So if you have an X-H2S or an X-T4 or X-T5, don't use this on the X-T5, but if you have a newer Fujifilm camera, everything is just better than it was on the X-T3. If I do an updated video, I'll also make sure to keep eye autofocus on at all times. I've been shooting so long that I'm accustomed to, for every camera, when it comes to shooting photos, I'm always in single point autofocus, which if you've seen any of my other videos, that's why I'm always in single point autofocus. I'm just used to locking, recomposing, locking, recomposing. Oh, and by the way, for anyone curious, if you're shooting wildlife, not sure I would really qualify this as a wildlife lens, but you do get 400mm with the teleconverter, so maybe. But it has the little slot in the bottom of the hood, so you can have a polarizer and defilter. You can turn it freely. There was also a point in time where every now and then I'll do an exercise where I walk around for a month, like casually using one focal length to kind of train my eye a little bit. And for a while, this was actually the lens I walked around on. For professionals, this kind of works better than a business card. And that's probably with any camera with like a really big lens on it. People will look at it and say, that dude's the professional. So much so that I had a friend of mine walking around with me in DC one day and I gave him the camera to try out. And everyone ended up going to him stating that, oh, you must be a professional, which the optics, not a pun on purpose, but the optics of having something like this, like they can really work in your favor. Just saying. Not a reason to buy this. Not at all. But if you're walking around an area with a lot of potential clients, maybe not a bad idea to leave this mounted on your camera and do a little perusing. Loiter around, maybe take an extended lunch in an area. Simple video for today. I wish I had photos of me using this while I was covering like competitions, but you know, that's not where my brain is when I'm covering a competition, but maybe I can go back to shooting one local comp and you guys can see what it looks like in action. With that being said, that's the end of this video, and you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. See ya.